Hey, I'm Kyle from the Shire. I'm out here with Jon Kiper at Kiper HQ. Jon Kiper, also from the Shire, not the one from Lord of the Rings, but the New Hampshire, of course. First off, Community First Party. We got 6 pillars here. We got community first, personal freedoms, accessible democracy, fix the voting system, no corrupting money, and no hate. You want to just get into that just a little bit?
Yeah, so the first idea is that we want to be pushing politicians and policies, legislation that is supporting our community, helping our community. And just the most basic ways that our community needs help, such as housing. We need lower property taxes specifically. We need to change the way we fund schools, that all kids have a fair chance for a good education. And I'm hoping that by having this third party, Community First, that is pushing for community support, community enrichment, that we'll force both the Republicans and the Democrats to have to focus on this issue. So, and there's a lot of debate, that we can have within what's going to make a community better. And we may disagree, and that's okay. Which leads us to the next big part of this whole message, which is not having any hate. And, I just looked at the political landscape. I mean, people are, the two power centers, the Democrats and the Republicans, really thrive of us hating each other. And they want us to focus our energy on each other, so they're not focusing on the real issue, which is frankly their donors. And it's the donors that are controlling the party and the oligarchs that have basically figured out how to manipulate the entire political system for their financial benefit. Which brings us to the next big pillar, which is we don't take money that's going to control our campaign. So we don't take money from APEC. We don't take money from any political action committee or any individual who is going to say, I want you to say or do X, Y, and Z. And I've learned from this campaign that there are two types of donors. There are ones that will just write you a check, no questions asked. That's a lot of the smaller dollar donations, of course, but even bigger ones. We got a $10,000 check from the only trans billionaire in the world, Jennifer Pritzker, no questions asked. On the other side of it, we've gotten a donation, a substantial one, $3,000 from an organization. That one was no questions asked, but when they wanted potentially to give us more money, we had a meeting and they basically said, don't say tax the rich. Don't talk about climate change. Don't talk about bipartisanship.
Right.
And so that made it really hard for us to work with them. And then the last thing that we're really pushing amongst those others is that we need more democratic reforms to get more different types of people involved in the legislative process. So specifically, I'm talking about ranked choice voting. And this would allow people of more fringe parties, people that maybe there's a liberal party that's starting in New Hampshire. There's a socialist party. There's the Democratic Socialists. There's libertarians and disgruntled Democrats and Republicans who don't feel like they're part of those parties. And wouldn't it be nice if we had ranked choice voting and people who had different ideas could potentially get elected in New Hampshire? And also within that democratic reforms is the idea of paying the state reps. That is really crucial in my mind to seeing reform in New Hampshire. And it's something that neither the Democrats or the Republicans really want to talk about. So those are really our 4 big pillars. And then obviously there's other things like personal freedom is really big and important for us. I think that, the live free or die ethos of New Hampshire is important. And I think we need to respect that and we need to implement it in policy. I had this idea where I wanted like a live free or die committee. And basically every time the legislature makes a law or is proposing a law, the live free or die committee just goes, is this live free or die?
Right.
Yes or no? Is it live free or die? And if it's not, let's not pursue that.
Right. Yeah, it seems like Republicans have a real weird idea about freedom when it comes to certain aspects, like trying to control like where trans people can exist in public and things like that. A lot of their so-called freedoms seem to be about excluding people, so that's definitely important to have like a coalition that brings like all people in,
Yeah, freedom for me and not for thee,
Right.
I think it's really important to call it out, because what ends up happening is Republicans are rage baiting. They're rage baiting their voters, and then we just end up having these massive fights about an issue that doesn't happen. And by that I mean trans people aren't going into bathrooms and like hurting people. Like that's just not happening.
And that is also illegal as well.
Yeah,
it's
already illegal.
No matter what. Like that is already a thing. That's like adding laws to say that like murder is extra illegal now. Like, first of all, it's a thing that's not happening. And second of all, it's just like what are you talking about? Like why are we adding? You're wasting time writing up legislation for things that aren't happening. And then the other half of it is that you're writing stuff that's just discriminating against like 5 out of like the hundreds of thousands of people that live here.
Well, and that's what the Republicans in New Hampshire love to. And I'm going to say Republicans in quotes because I don't really think they're Republicans. They're free state whatevers. But
right.
Yeah, I mean, they're obsessed with trans people, and then they manage to make the whole conversation about trans sports, bathrooms, because that way they don't have to talk about housing, property taxes, and education funding. And they don't want to talk about the real issues because they have no answers for those,
Right.
And also, I think it's important for people to know that there was a guy named Terry Schilling. He was a conservative Republican sort of marketing guy who had the idea of like when gay marriage was legalized, he said, hey, why don't we use trans people as a new way to rally the base?
Right.
And so I think it's important for Democrats and people that know that to call it out and say, look, the Republicans are trying to get you distracted by this issue. That really does not affect, how many trans kids are trying to play sports in New Hampshire? Like a dozen, 12 people or something? It's a minuscule, small amount of people, regardless of how you feel about the issue. And so legislating in that way is it's completely insane. And I like what you're saying about, and I think this is true. The Republicans are constantly solving problems that don't exist in New Hampshire.
Yeah. And it's like, well, you try to bring up other stuff. In fact, they had... within the past few months, right, they had actually blocked about like 70 bills that were trying to be put forward by like running out of the time and doing all this like procedural fuckery, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Well, and I mean, that whole thing, I think just to my mind, calls out just how dysfunctional the entire system is. And we need massive reforms in the state of New Hampshire in how our government functions. And part of that's paying the state reps for sure. Part of that, I think, is reducing the number of state reps to make it more manageable, to make the government more receptive, and just making sure that, we're getting good policy, and we're not right now. We're really not.
And that the whole paying reps thing, that brings up a really huge point that a lot of people, I think most people, even that are into politics, don't really think of or bring up, is that when you have like a basically non-paying job that you're running for, that kind of, it just blocks anyone that is like lower threshold in like income from actually running for the office and actually doing the job, because they have like a full-time job to do already.
Yeah, and some people can pull it off for a little while. Like Jared Sullivan has been pulling it off, and Paige Boschman and Heath Howard, obviously. But it's just really hard, and you can't do it forever. Jared Sullivan's, I think, on his second term, and he said, I can't do this forever. I have to go back to work. Like he's scooping ice cream and working as a janitor just to pay his bills. And
just like gates a lot of people that could be doing a lot of good from actually getting involved in this stuff.
Well, and this is what drives me crazy, that the Democrats didn't back this. I mean, this is frankly a cornerstone reason why I left the party, is because, not only did they not back it, but they were like vocally opposed to it. And this was really funny to me, because I met with Matt Willem, who used to be the minority leader when I was running last time. And he said, hey, thanks for bringing up this idea of paying the reps, because as a state rep, we can't really do it without it looking like we're trying to get money.
Right.
And I understand that. They don't want to be like, hey, we're trying to get paid. But in a practical sense, like you literally have some state reps that are on food stamps. Right. And when I started bringing this up, and I initiated this lawsuit against the state to have them justify how the state reps are not paid, how that makes any sense. The current minority leader, Alexis Simpson, said, oh, this is a distraction, because at the time the food stamps was getting, Trump was blocking the food stamp money from going out. You remember that? And the thing I wanted to say is, like, how can we believe that you're going to fight for us, for workers to have a minimum wage, for workers to have rights, when you won't even fight for your own colleagues in the state house to get paid minimum wage.
Right.
Some of them are on food stamps and are worried about the food stamps because you won't stand up and say these people need to get paid. And an important thing that I learned in conducting that lawsuit, actually, I learned this from the Assistant Attorney General's office, because in their rebuttal to my lawsuit, they said, this is really crucial, is in 1889, and you can look this up, New Hampshire, it's New Hampshire Constitutional Convention Journal of 1889. It says basically what happened, and I think this cracks me up. There was this one state rep who said, hey, there's people that are here that are wasting time because we get paid by the day. It was $3 a day, which is equal to about $100 today. And he said, I want us to be more efficient. I don't want these guys talking about BS because they're just trying to extend this session so that they get paid more. And he said, we should be able to wrap up all of our work in about 6 or 8 weeks. And let's just have a stipend for that amount of time, roughly $100. And that way, once we're not getting paid, they're going to wrap it up real quick. Like, we should be efficient with the people's time and the money and all that sort of thing. Which, if you think about that, it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, it's just another one of those super like holdover things that just have never gotten updated.
Well, and then now they do this justification where they act like it was written into law to only be $100 so that it was a citizen legislature. That's not true. That is a lie.
And that also opens up the door to, like, well, I can't get paid from just the job alone. Let me talk to these donors.
Well, and not only that, but it's a bunch of the Republicans, and the Democrats I don't think are doing this, which is probably why we're losing. So, a bunch of the Republicans are on the payroll for some organizations where they functionally do nothing.
The chair of the blank, the head of this.
Yeah, and some of them have these sketchy ways of, that own a lobbying company, and they've just figured out ways to manipulate the system. So, like, the idea that 400 people are driving to Concord for no money is just not true. Like, they're getting paid. They're just not getting paid by us. And they're making decisions not for us. They work for who they get paid by. So, and the fact that Democrats wouldn't go to bat, didn't want to fight for that issue, I just thought was so naive, because I literally think almost all the problems in New Hampshire stem from this one thing. And it frustrates me. Like, I have a hard time going and even testifying against bills and stuff in the State House. Because so frequently you go and do that, they ignore you, they just do whatever they want anyway, because they don't work for us. And to me, I almost look at it I do. I think the State House is run by people that should not be there. Many of them should not be there and wouldn't be if the system was just and the system was actually democracy. And so I find it very frustrating, because it's almost like our State House is basically like captured, is basically not democracy. It's in this weird way where it's not like even necessarily like always the richest person who ends up there. It might be just someone that's retired and has the time. But at the end of the day, what it isn't is a bunch of working class people. It's not a bunch of young people. And it's really hard for me. I'd like to go out there and say, hey, Kyle, you should run for state rep and you can be on my team. How do I do it for someone that, for a job that doesn't pay? It's just, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's basically.
And people should know, if you didn't know, New Hampshire is the only state that doesn't pay its reps a decent amount of money. And I'm not talking millions of dollars. I'm talking like $10,000, $100 a day. Like, just something to make it feasible in a way, know?
Something where you could be like, all right, well, I can have a part-time job and still afford to do this.
And just time, And there's just also a thing with compensating people for their time. There's an ethic to that and a responsibility for that to happen. When I was on this town council in Newmarket, we didn't get paid a lot. It was about $1,500 a year. But, after going to a meeting where I'm getting screamed at about masks and stuff like that during the pandemic, it was nice. I spent $400 on this guitar, and whenever people were mean to me at meetings, I'd go home and I'd play my guitar and I'd say, maybe this, I can see this through.
So this is an actual a total third party, not like a subsection in the Free State Project, where it's like, oh, we're gonna all be in this coalition together, but we're running as Republicans. So this is actually like a third party separate from Democrats.
So my goal is basically, I want to get ballot access in 2026 so that people who are disgruntled with the two parties, particularly the leadership, because it's not the rank and file that I have a bone to pick with, it's the leadership, and that's really important for people to know.
For sure.
I would like those people to have a home, a political home, a spot on the ballot where they can run, where they can vote. But at the same time, I also would like to build a coalition with Democrats and Republicans and say, hey, you can be a community first Democrat, you can be a community first Republican. For instance, I'd like to run candidates as community first in maybe a red district where there's no chance of a Democrat winning, and subsequently, maybe there's a Democrat who keeps getting elected somewhere who basically votes like a Republican.
Right.
You know, put somebody up against him or her, and be strategic about it, because at the end of the day, like, I don't think we're going to replace either of the parties, to be fair. But I think that what we can do is, one, force them to focus on the issues that we want to focus on, and ideally, I become governor, right? Community first, and then maybe I only have a handful of state reps and maybe just 1 or 2 senators. But from that position, we can then negotiate in the middle. Right. And work with Democrats on some issues, work with Republicans on some issues. And we would kind of, in a way, become the arbiter of the final outcomes, which is really, it's a way for, I think, a small group of people to affect change. And New Hampshire is a great place to do it because we have this elusive swing voter, you know, where some are voting Democrat for Chris Pappas and Mag Goodlander, and then voting Republican for Kelly Ayotte and for the Senate and stuff, and the Executive Council. So I think we've got to do something to break this kind of break this system in a way so that we can get better results.
Right, with all the the different parties kind of blending in on certain issues where they kind of shouldn't. It'll definitely be great to see, like, a coalition, like a third party type deal, like, actually bringing people together on issues that are, like, relevant to working class. So that'll be great.
Well, one thing that, like, so if we had planned this out, if this was decades in the making, I would have had a slate of candidates to run for, CD1, CD2, Senate, governor, right? It basically, hopefully will, bring people along in subsequent years. But I just wanted people to imagine for a second, if you've got, Chris Pappas and John Sununu on a stage, and there's a third person there who is saying, I will drop out and I will endorse whoever of these two people will say that they're not taking APEC money. That's it. I'll drop out.
Right.
And they won't be able to do it. And people will be going, oh, you're going to spoil this election. And the person in the middle is going to be going, all they have to do is stop taking the money, and I'll drop out and endorse them. Like, it's just a simple request. And if they can't do it, I think that would be the proof that they would rather lose than give up the money. And at that point, they're no longer a serious political entity.
Yeah, definitely agree there. And you talk about like building coalitions between more right and left leaning people, and it's like there's proof like that can work, like, right now. Look at Mom Donnie and Trump coming together.
Yeah.
Like, how do you think Mom Donnie convinced Trump, like, that he was going to be good on policy there? It's because a lot of times like capitalism and community can come together in certain ways. Like, when Mom Donnie said they're going to do bus fares for free, that's going to allow people to save their money, be able to use the free busing to get to the shopping districts, to spend their money,
right,
to move it around the economy more.
And this is that's great, because that is the exact definition of community first economics, right? That's it. Is that whatever we can do to get more money into the average working person's hand is better for the community and better for that Main Street economy, if you will.
Right.
The book starts out with this story about a guy that we nicknamed the Big Kahuna. And we did that because he came in one day, and he only came in about once a month. But he came in, he requested this burger that wasn't on the menu. And it was a burger with pulled pork, barbecue sauce, cheddar cheese, a fried egg, sriracha, hot sauce on it. And massive burger. And I ended up putting it on the menu, calling it the Big Kahuna. It was very popular. So he'd come in and we'd say, oh, Big Kahuna's here. And around Christmas, he started coming in multiple times a week, like way more than he usually did. So one day I said to him, hey, I'm just curious, not that I'm offended, but why are you coming in so much more? And he said, I work for Best Buy, and they normally give me 20 hours a week. But around Christmas, they allow me to work as much as I can, or they require me to do that and work overtime. And then he said this line, which kind of stuck with me for a while. That's why I wrote the book, where he said, if Best Buy paid me more, I would eat here more. And it kind of unlocked this just idea in my head that, what we're suffering through right now is extraction capitalism. This idea of trickle-down economics was BS. It was never going to happen. And so the more money that goes to mortgages and goes to rent is less money that's circulating in the economy, less money for people to spend on burgers at my restaurant.
Right.
And then once you start looking at extrapolating that out, you're like, oh, very high healthcare costs are bad for the economy because they have less money to spend, like you're saying. if you have to spend money for buses, and then you less money to spend on other things. So I think we can really reverse this idea about how the government functions, and we want the government to create an economy that fundamentally is allowing the most people to pursue happiness. I think that's kind of a founding line of our country that I think we've forgotten about, is that this country is built for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And how can you pursue happiness if you're homeless or hungry or, worried about getting a medical bill that's going to bankrupt you? You can't. So I think we really need to get back to this basic idea of like, what does the government function for and who? And right now it's the oligarchs, it's the ruling class, and it's because they have gotten so wealthy that they could basically buy up the entire government.
Right. And there's the thing is, too, is with these billionaires, the money is just sitting around. It's not moving through the economy.
Yeah.
And the more money that the lower class, or not even lower class, so basically there is no middle class anymore. What's halfway between, like 15,000 a year and like 100 billion a year? Like that's the middle of that is not where our middle class is in America right now. So
yeah, people are getting ravaged. I mean, I know a lot of people that make six figures and still are, basically living paycheck to paycheck because their property taxes have gone up, their healthcare costs have gone up. People are really struggling. And I think this is fundamentally, what people need to understand. Inequality is why Donald Trump exists. He's a symptom of it. He's not the cause. Mm-hmm. It was happening for a long time. It was accelerated with Ronald Reagan and this move towards trickle-down economics. And the problem is the Democrats and the Republicans are ignoring this issue because their donors are benefiting from it. And historically, we have seen that when inequality gets out of control, and the two parties ignore it, then there's an opportunity for a new party to rise up. And the best example of this is the greatest inequality that our country's ever endured or facilitated, and that was slavery. A whole group of people completely captured literally economically. No ability to earn their own money, no ability to move freely. Like, it's the worst type of inequality ever. And what happened in the 1800s is neither the Whigs nor the Democrats wanted to deal with this issue because they had voters in both camps. Mm. Much like today, the Democrats and Republicans don't want to deal with inequality because they have donors. Now it's not voters, it's donors in both camps, or in this one camp of the ruling class. Mm. And so what happened with slavery was, first there was this party called the Liberty Party. It was not very big, but they got a little bit of traction. They wanted to eliminate slavery altogether. And then another party rose up called the Free Soil Party, and they said, look, we're not going to go that extreme. We're just going to say no slavery in new states that are forming out west. So they got a little bit more traction in the Liberty Party. And then some folks that were disgruntled with both parties not dealing with slavery looked at the success of these two parties and said, wow, maybe we can build an even bigger coalition and eliminate slavery altogether. And that was the Republicans. And they went from not existing to 6 years later electing Abe Lincoln to president. Mm-hmm. And what's really important is the Republicans approached it differently than the Free Soil Party or the Liberty Party had, where they were like, we want this big coalition. Mm. So they even included in their coalition this group called the Know Nothings. And the Know Nothings was a party that basically arose specifically to push back against immigration. They didn't want any immigration because they were fighting for the average person, worker, to get paid more. And you bring in more immigrants, then it deflates the amount they get paid. And likewise, they were anti-slavery, but not for altruistic reasons or not for humanitarian reasons, but because, and I never thought about this before, but a white guy who's a farmer, how can he compete against a slave? It makes his wages like almost, they couldn't find work. So the Republicans made a grand coalition. It included people that they disagreed with on this issue of immigration, but they agreed on the bigger issue of slavery. And so that's how they were able to get it through. And then, the Know Nothings got absorbed into the party and their views on immigration were irrelevant, later on. So the point of that story is just that the idea that third parties have had no effect on U.S. politics is a lie that the leadership in both parties will tell and push because they don't want change. And that really, if you look at the history of the two parties, third parties have frequently pushed them, even when they weren't successful. And this happened again at the end of the 1800s. We were dealing with the rise of the robber barons, right? So they're buying up, big oil, they're buying up all these railroad tracks. and they were really crushing farmers because they were able to charge whatever they wanted because of these monopolies. So the farmers were really upset. And out of that anger came the People's Party, or the Populist Party. And they push a really progressive agenda at the time, such as an income tax on the wealthy and direct election of senators. And they weren't successful. They had a little bit of success, but they didn't win the presidency or anything. But their ideas were pushed on, and then Teddy Roosevelt adopted some of these ideas, and he formed the Progressive Party. And then eventually the Democrats realized how big this coalition was. And also people were signing up to be socialists by the thousands, if not millions. And so when the Great Depression happened, the Democrats realized they had to give the people some socialism, or there was going to be a complete socialist revolution. And so they basically looked at what the progressives had been pushing in the 30 or 40 years earlier, in the late 1800s, and they basically adopted that whole platform.
Right.
So what'll happen is, there's three outcomes with our party, to be completely honest. The first outcome is, frankly, I'll be honest, the most likely, which is we fail to get the signatures, or we fail to get ballot access. So we need 3,000 signatures to get on the ballot, and then we need to get 4% of the vote in 2026 to then be on the ballot in 2028 without the signature requirement. It's possible that those don't work out. So then we just fizzle out, and this has happened to many parties along the way. Now, the second option is that our ideas are powerful, and either the Republicans or the Democrats realize how powerful our ideas are, and they co-opt them, which happens a lot. And sometimes they co-opt them and then gut them,
right?
Which is a good thing.
That's a good campaign slogan. I'm not going to do it, but
I'm going to say it. Yeah. Or the third option is that we are able to siphon enough people off of either party that we become a dominant party, or at least balance within the three parties in New Hampshire.
Right.
And I think now people really need to understand where we are historically, because for Donald Trump to be so unpopular, but then the Democrats to similarly be even actually less popular than him, it shows that everyone's mad at both parties. They want solutions. And what I'm afraid is going to happen is that in 2026, there's going to be a blue wave because Donald Trump bad. In 2028, let's say another blue wave. Get a Democrat in there. If the Democrats do not do anything to help the average people, to lower inequality, to deal with the affordability issue, it's going to be probably Tucker Carlson come 36 or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, if not now, because of all the populist things that he's co-opted.
Yeah, he could run in 2028.
Literally.
And if
we could be looking at it right now if the Democrats aren't willing to put up someone with the actual ideas of change and helping people that are going to implement them.
Yeah, exactly. And this is.
And if they do nothing and go back and try to say that they want to go back to the status quo, no one wants that.
Yeah, I know,
That's
exactly.
Another reason Kamala lost.
Exactly. No one wants the status quo. And that's really the problem is Trump was offering a difference to the status quo. And maybe it was crazy, but he's saying, hey, we're going to blow up the system. And people wanted the system blown up. So, I think, another really interesting thing that I've realized is from research is that, all right, one, it's clear the Democrats don't care about the coalition enough to do anything to keep progressives in it. They're making no concessions about pushing for Medicare for all or not facilitating mass murder in the Middle East. And so they don't care about the coalition. Okay. And then the other thing is that progressives, their message is much more effective when it's presented by someone that's not a Democrat. And they've done studies on this, and they've found that basically the word Democrat is almost poison for a whole bunch of people, on the right and right of center. People that I think actually agree with a lot of these things, but it's just when it's brought by a Democrat, they don't trust the messenger.
Which is why a lot of people that are more progressive will run as independents in red states, red districts.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so that's, once you realize all three of those things, that the Democrats have no desire to keep the progressives in the coalition, progressive messaging is better presented by people that aren't progressives. Third obvious conclusion is, why are we still here? Why are we still here with people that don't want us? That to me is the ultimate conclusion that I came out of my 5 or 6 months trying to campaign as a Democrat. It's they didn't want my message. The leadership didn't. A lot of people liked the message. The people I was going and talking to, but it was clear no one would endorse me. Almost none elected officials did. They really did not want anything to do with me. And so not just me, but the movement, they didn't want to deal with the ideas. They did not like tax the rich at all. And I had a couple people say, oh, I don't know about tax the rich. Maybe you should say X, Y, and Z. And I said, look, tax the rich has bipartisan support.
Right.
Republicans support the phrase tax the rich by like 55, 56%. Independents, it's like 70%. Total, it's huge. It's
Right.
just very popular phrase.
Like, where are you guys getting your information from? Don't ask the rich if they would like to be taxed. You have to ask the rest of the people who, like, you know, could use some of that tax money to help out with, you know, social services, things of that nature. The government's supposed to be there to provide for the people, right? Like, I don't understand how there's just so many people out there that thinks the government should just be this like nebulous thing that like does nothing and like lowers taxes and that's it.
Yeah.
And it's like, what? Then why do we live in a country?
Right.
Like, what are we
Well,
doing
and some people don't want to even have a country. You know, I think they want to have just a loose affiliation of people that are somehow all scrambling around. This is the libertarians,
right? Exactly.
The Free State Project. I mean, and I think the other thing that's really important for people to understand is the phrase tax the rich is actually a pro-rich statement. Because I'm saying, let's tax them so that we don't end up with a French Revolution or, you know, something like that, a Roman Revolution or any sort of revolution, which potentially, who's going to be hurt by a revolution? I mean, the outcomes are unknown. And that's why I kind of am always worried when people talk about revolution, because you could end up with more democracy or more authoritarianism. You know, you never know. But ultimately, you know, if there is some sort of revolution, populist uprising, the rich are going to suffer. So I'm saying, hey, acknowledge history. Like it doesn't just be as a
like the anti-revolution tax, like before. Like,
well, this is what FDR said. He said, "I am the best friend of the corporation and the wealthy by implementing Social Security. I'm preventing a socialist revolution from happening in the U.S." So.
And all these companies, anyway, are taking advantage of the public infrastructure.
Yes.
As well, like you don't like the companies are not like themselves paying for roads, but if the way you tax them, you can afford to have better road systems.
Well, that's it. And it's funny you say it because that's actually like a big chunk of my book, Community First Economics, where I talk about just think about Jeff Bezos. He benefits from his trucks driving on the roads. He benefits from the police who guard his trucks who drive on the roads. He benefits from the Navy who guards the seaways so that his packages can come from, stuff can come from China to the U.S. He's benefiting to the tune of billions of dollars. Not to mention even the fact that like the internet was created by U.S. Military and U.S. intelligence, and it was all of this infrastructure, digital and physical, was paid for by our tax money, and like. He's benefiting massively. And the fact that they have convinced so many people that his wealth is somehow just his and had nothing, that no one else had anything to do with him getting rich is just preposterous. And it's a lie that the rich perpetuate.
Right.
Yeah.
Like how does one earn like billions of dollars? It's like, I don't think people understand how much $1 billion is.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Well, and the other thing too is just from like the position of his shareholders, shouldn't they want all of the tax, the drivers for Amazon to get paid more so that they can then buy more stuff from Amazon?
Right.
It doesn't matter. Yeah. It doesn't help Amazon if Jeff Bezos buys another yacht. But if all of his drivers could buy more crap on Amazon, that would improve the bottom line.
So how would you deal with like obstructionists in like both Democrats and Republicans that would be looking to block your agenda if you were, elected?
I think that they would be forced to deal with me because otherwise I would just veto their bills.
Yeah.
I thought about this idea at one point where I was like, if the Democrats, or let's say take the executive council, for instance, if they were blocking my legislation or things I want to pass, I would just have the legislator write a bill to eliminate the executive council. And I wouldn't have them, even propose it. I would just have them write it up. And whenever the executive council was giving me grief, I'd say, hey, we could do this. We could eliminate you guys. It's possible. There's a way to do that. Might take a constitutional convention, but we can do that.
Okay, hold on. Are you saying that not only can Republicans use like procedural things that they're legally allowed to do, but Democrats can also do things as well? You can also use the bully pulpit.
Yeah, and you could just threaten to veto all their legislation. I mean, it would be annoying, but there's things that you could do to force them to the table and say, look, I'll veto every freaking bill out of this house by both parties if you guys don't get in line and start paying the reps.
Right.
And that's it. I mean, that's part of the thing, is I realized the money was so controlling of these two parties that we had to think outside the box. We had to sort of evolve our tactics. We can't keep playing in a rigged game when we don't have to. I don't have to run as a Democrat. Anyone else can run in the Democratic Party. I don't have to. I'm under no obligation. Mm-hmm. And given how clearly they were not into the message, that's fine. There are other people that are, know?
Yeah. This whole thing of you have to vote for this one or this party, or you can't do this because this person is unelectable, this and that. It's just always, it seems to be a tactic to get people to stand in line with whoever has the most money. It's
that's it.
This person has the most ad money, so that means that everyone's gonna vote for them. So if you don't, you're splitting the vote. But it's that's not really how a lot of people think. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, no, and it perpetuates this idea that you need a bunch of money. If everyone thinks you need a bunch of money, even though if a bunch of that money is going to consultants, which frequently happens, and not even being spent very wisely, then, what is the point? If Kamala Harris can raise $1.5 billion and still not be president, at a certain point, the money is not the issue. And it was kind of funny because I had this problem with some of the progressive action committees in New Hampshire that I will not name who they are, but some of them straight up said, I don't think you have the money, to win this campaign. I'm like, well, it's a primary. Isn't the point that you just try to signal which candidate, you most align with? This is your one chance,
Right.
Whatever happens, happens. But and as it turned out, I don't think there's any amount of money that Joyce Craig could have raised that would have won her that election. It just was not possible. So it's really funny because a lot of these progressive organizations are so committed to the money too that you'll see them actually endorsing candidates that do not align with them because those candidates have a bunch of money in the bank.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and just more reasons why I felt like New Hampshire's just sort of stuck, and that the only way to unstick it was to get out of the Democratic Party because you've got all these progressive organizations, right? All these political action committees. There's dozens of them, 350.org, New Hampshire Youth Movement, all these groups, right? And they've all been around for 10 or so years, some of them longer. But I think probably the last 10 or 20 years has been really the peak of these organizations sort of forming in New Hampshire. And over that timeline, has New Hampshire become more progressive or less progressive? I would say less progressive. So whatever they're doing, it's not working. And they're spending a ton of money. They have a ton of people. They have a bunch of volunteers, yet they are not really able to do anything. And on the flip side of it, the Free State Project, with only 6,000 to 10,000 members, the Democrats have way more than that.
Right.
Are able to control the entire state house, New Hampshire, it doesn't make any sense. Something is completely broken, and I don't know really what it is, but that's why I was like, this whole system is broken. It's not just one group or one person. I mean, there are some people that are bad in leadership, but fundamentally, I was like, I can't continue to support what I think is an organization that's not built to win elections. It's built for a purpose of raising money, distributing funds, but not winning elections.
How would you deal with the pressure from the Trump admin and threats of federal defunding? Because, Trump likes to do these things.
It's hard. What are we going to do? But I think it's proof that New Hampshire needs to stop relying on the federal government. I think if we learned anything from this whole fiasco, it's that if a president can come in and just eliminate programs, eliminate, student loan programs, student loan forgiveness that he's messed with that. He's messed with the Department of Education, obviously SNAP benefits, ETs. We need to build our own social safety net and stop relying on the federal government for a lot of this stuff. So that is really my goal, is to become less reliant on the federal government.
And that comes back to the higher taxes for the higher earners. That way, that's how you make the state more self-sufficient. In that way. It's if it's always just lower taxes, then what are we using to run our state?
Right. And this is a fundamental difference between the Free State Project Republicans and the actual, my grandfather's Republicans. My grandfather's Republicans, they believed in low taxes, small government. Okay. These people believe in no taxes, no government. They're functionally anarchists or nihilists or something. They don't want any structure. And frankly, it's an immature worldview, in my opinion. It's people that have never worked on a group project, that have never been involved in municipal government, and see how hard it is even right now with our system that we have to get water pipes funded and built, or roads paved, sidewalks paved. And it's people looking at a system that was built through taxation. You know, all the infrastructure in New Hampshire was built through taxation, and they want to act like they can move here, use that infrastructure without contributing to its maintenance or its future, upgrades, and it's just it's selfish and it's immature.
Yeah, definitely agree there. And I think a big issue that Republicans seem to have like capitalized on is the like Democratic or even like leftist, progressive, whatever you would want to say, like the lack of like ability to like brand themselves and put their actual like ideas that are good out there.
I was doing some research and I was like, are there 3 policies that the New Hampshire Democrats have gotten accomplished in the last 2 decades that have helped the average person? 3, right?
Yeah.
I could find Medicaid expansion in 2014, which expanded healthcare for a bunch of people, including my son. That's great. I couldn't find any more. They've stopped a lot of bad legislation, sure. But have they actually brought forward an idea and got it across the finish line in a way that the average person goes, thank you, the Democrats have done something for me? And they have not. And fundamentally, I used to hear this criticism that the Democrats are just controlled opposition, and I'd say, that's crazy. But more and more, it just seems to be the way it is. When Rebecca Perkins-Coca, our minority leader in the Senate, when she went on WMUR right after the last election, the interviewer, Adam Sexton, says, what are you guys going to do differently? And she says, nothing. We're going to keep fighting for, New Hampshire's working people. And the Republicans literally saw it and goes, great, you'll continue to lose. And I tried to explain this to them for months and months and months that they had to change the direction of the ship. And they completely ignored me. They don't want to hear any sort of criticism. They don't want to hear any sort of reality check. They just want to hear their own voices and their own ideas. And it's all very self-serving arguments. When I said during the campaign, I said, Joe Biden's too old after the debate. I was like, he cannot run. This doesn't make any sense. Ray Buckley, the chair of the party, said, "Oh, these bedwetters that are, literally, I forget it was the vice. Somebody in the party leadership said, suck it up, Buttercup. Joe Biden's the nominee." I was like, and I said to this one older woman at one of the meetings, I said, young people just are not going to vote for this guy because of Gaza and because of these other issues. And she said, well, they just have to. Donald Trump's so bad, they have to vote. I'm like, they don't have to vote. We don't have to do anything we don't want to.
Exactly. Like how many people do you think stayed home because of that? That's not how you get people out. It's not like, oh, do this or else. Like, well, a lot of people are going to be like, well, if you're not going to do anything for me, well, then fuck you. I'm not.
Yeah. And they don't understand that we can do this. And I mean, I voted for Kamala Harris because I thought it was better than the alternative. And I will say, I don't want to create a party just to screw the Democrats. So it's important for the Community First Party to, 1, be trying to appeal to people on the right, and 2, to be supporting Democrats when it makes sense, and or Republicans when it makes sense, to be honest.
Right.
If there was a Republican who was running on a platform of breaking up the Free State Project's control of the Republican Party, I would vote for that person if that was their real intent. I don't think that's going to happen, but just an example. So, it's really, I think will ultimately actually benefit the Democrats and the Republicans. They're not going to understand this. It'll probably take a few years for this to sink in. But ultimately, what my goal is with the Community First Party is that, rather than being like a centrist, like we're the middle between the Democrats and the Republicans, it's more of like a triangle. And, we're not trying to pick, like say, what's the centrist view on, healthcare? It's probably Obamacare, I guess. I'm for Medicare for all. If New England could implement a system like that, I think we probably could, where Medicare, you could buy in at least, a single payer or whatever we can do basically to lower healthcare costs. I'm open to any idea that can do that, regardless of how you describe it or what, is it free market or is it socialistic? I mean, it seems like we tried free market, it's not working. So just like we are looking to just implement policies that achieve success, regardless of how they're framed. And so ultimately what I think is by being this sort of living in the nuance, if you will, living in this gray area where frankly, a lot of the issues actually sit and being, being able to say, hey, we want to use our Second Amendment right to defend people that need abortions and, and whatever, so we're kind of being, taking the best from both parties, if you will. But ultimately, the benefit for the Democrats is that it would be a place for disgruntled Democrats to go that wasn't Republicans. And this was the problem. Yeah. And likewise for the Republicans, for those of you who did not like Donald Trump, but also were like, well, I'm not a Democrat, to have somewhere for them to go, it will balance the power, I think. And be kind of this middle zone when the other two parties seem like they're out of line. And will hopefully pull them into more community-minded policy. And ultimately, that's the goal. People don't get that, and it's a longer-term goal. But I think realistically, it will be a much better place for the state if we can pull this off. And I think we can. I think that New Hampshire is really the only place you could do it. But again, I'm not saying go vote third party for all elections forever. Like that doesn't make sense. I'm more saying let's think more about policy and people and less this tribalism, because the tribalism has just gotten out of control.
Basically, it sounds like you want to focus on like actual policies versus culture war things, like
and outcomes. Policies and outcomes.
What actually, I think it's crazy that people like prioritize. I want to say like culture war issue things, it really blows my mind that people like are just so interested in like governing what people specifically can and can't do while being I'm all about freedom and this and that. It's like what why are we not focusing on policies and that's what the right does not want anyone to do. That's what like these corporate Democrats don't want anyone to do. They're like, no, let's just keep fighting on these social issues. Like me personally, I don't think social like issues like people's rights should be even up for debate. Like just throw all that shit out the window. Yeah. What are your policies and like how are you going to help like everyone?
100%. And I think that the thing that's really important to remember is like Cindy Warmington, for instance, right? Corporate Democrat. She will have no problem talking about abortion, LGBTQ rights, gun bans, because none of those affect the donors. Okay, you will never hear her say tax the rich or we've got an inequality problem, because those are the people that are paying for her campaigns are benefiting from that inequality. And likewise, Republicans, same thing. Elected Republicans, you're never going to hear them talking about any real issues. They stick to these social issues to keep us occupied. Do the oligarchs really care about trans issues or abortion or any of this stuff? At the end of the day, no. They care most about their power. They might care on a superficial level, sure. They might have an opinion, but at the end of the day, what they want most of all is us fighting each other. Yeah. And that is like the most important thing. It's what the Community First Party is trying to defuse this polar, this partisanship, this polarization that I think will lead to civil war if we don't do something. And I don't want civil war. Yeah. I don't want violence at all. So I think that we can bring the pressure down and we can force politicians to get back thinking about common sense issues, because it's just, they just try and distract you with these issues that, while relevant, you can't do anything without power anyway, and it's like, where are the Democrats now with trans issues? Like they don't have the power to even defend the most vulnerable people in their community because they weren't willing to appease the Gaza voters, talk about inequality, and now they don't have power to help these marginalized communities, that they have really just thrown all of them under the bus in a way, sacrifice them literally, figuratively to this Gaza issue, which they were not willing to address. So, that's why it's just so important that people start to recognize, like, without power, we can't do anything about any of these issues. So we've got to get that. And there's so many Democrats that just do not understand that. Guns is a real big one. Just the Democrats are so obsessed with banning AR-15s particularly. Right. And like I said, when you bring up these gun bans, people buy more guns. So I'm saying don't talk about gun bans, and then we can talk about reasonable gun safety solutions. Right. I don't think guns should be at frat houses, for instance. I think that's a fair request.
I covered that yesterday, that they're literally trying to push something through to allow that. But it's like, are you like, this is what you guys are focusing on? We like, all right, dude.
But when I was trying to explain this to the Democrats, this one woman, she said, well, because I said, hey, there's these voters out there that align with Democrats on almost all the issues, but they want to own guns and they vote for Democrats for national offices, but not for state offices because they're afraid that a Democratic governor will ban their guns. It doesn't help that Joyce Craig and Cindy Warmington went out there and said that. And this woman said, well, why do we need their votes? We don't need those people's votes. And I thought, we need all the votes. We need as many votes as we can get. And that attitude I heard, one guy, David Muse, he's a state rep in Portsmouth, he was very angry at me at because I said I wasn't proposing any gun bans, and he's obsessed with guns. It's pretty much his whole thing in the state house, written a lot of legislation, none of it's gotten passed. And I said to him, David, how long have you been up there? He said, 8 years. I said, in that time, have guns become more accessible or less accessible? And he said, less accessible. And I said, so you have not been successful at what you're doing. Don't you think maybe it's time to change the way that you're approaching this? And he said, well, I've written all this great legislation that's very constitutional and it will hold up. And historically, I hope somebody, will see what I wrote and then blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, so you don't care about winning. Right, so you don't care about actually enacting any of this stuff. It's just like a pet.
How many of those went through? You wrote a bunch of stuff. Does that mean it happened? Or
none of it happened. And so they live in this world that if they feel morally superior to the people on the right, that it doesn't matter win or lose because we're morally superior. We don't need to win anyone that voted for Trump. Well, you do to win another election. We don't have to win anyone that voted for Kelly Ayotte. You do. Okay, you have to win some people that voted for her. The math is the math. There's 28% of the state is Democrats. You can't win otherwise.
There seems to be a lot of the selective poll reading too. It's like they'll be like, well, look at this poll that says this specifically over here, but then these 12 other ones say the opposite. But don't. I'm not going to look at those ones. I'm going to look at the ones the consultants have handed me and said that I should keep doing what I'm doing.
Yes, exactly.
And it's you got to actually look at where the voters are for real. You can't just self-select.
And the consultant, I think that's another really interesting aspect we should talk about because you have these consultants that have to, they require campaigns to raise a bunch of money and pay them. And it was so funny because I talked to one of them and I was saying that, hey, I think the way to get money out of politics is to do politics with as little money as possible. Rather than celebrating, hey, you see these people hey, I just raised $1 million in the last quarter. And I'm like, so, it's just a waste of money in my opinion. I don't think you need that much money to run a campaign. But
for what? Ads?
Yeah. I would tell this to consultants and they would get so upset. They'd be like, no, you need a lot of money to campaign. Just realistically, you need all millions of dollars. And it's because their livelihood requires that money is there.
It's like, no, you need to pay my salary. Raise us money.
I had this one guy, it was so funny, it was on Facebook, he commented, he said, I think you're wrong. I think we do need to raise a lot of money. I don't think you can run a campaign successfully without millions of dollars. And I was like, that's interesting. And I clicked on his profile and he had just graduated from some college with a poli-sci degree. And I'm like, oh, he needs this to be true because his degree depends on it. So you have all these sort of parasitic entities between the political action committees and the consultants who sort of almost do better when the Democrats are, well, no, it doesn't matter if they win or lose because they get paid either way. And so, at a certain point, you just look at these groups and you say, and these donors or these consultants and say, if you're not getting wins, but you get paid either way, what's your incentive?
You're like, what is the incentive to actually get people to win? It's ridiculous. So you were an author before getting into politics, and WMUR put out a couple of what I would consider smear pieces on you involving a book from several years ago. And then one, scandal involving leaked text or whatever. So what was this whole thing about the book? It had some naughty language in there they didn't like?
So the book, and I probably did a really bad job explaining this, but I was trying to make a point with the book about poetry and about myself. And basically, I have ADHD, right? So I sometimes struggle with studying, and I didn't do great in school, and I never went to college. So I kind of look at myself as, kind of a hack, if you will. But the whole point of the book was that anyone can write poetry, right? Anyone's allowed to write poetry. So
just like anyone's allowed to come and interview people, right?
Anyone can make a podcast. Anyone can run for governor as long as you're qualified. There's no rules, guys. You can write poems.
And you can self-educate yourself a lot these days. The internet's a powerful tool if you have media literacy.
So the offense was that I used in a couple places in the book, I used the R word. And the book was actually called Poetry for Leotards. And it was supposed to be reflective of my feelings about myself. And I did it intentionally to as rage bait. I mean, that's why I called the book that in 2012, 10 plus years ago.
I love wordplay too, so I can't be
I mean, it was this poetry book that I, in my mind, thought probably 20 people are going to read, you know? And so the thing that was frustrating about that was I brought with me another book that's called it's called A Ghost in the Darkness, The True Story of the Vicky Bader Murder, which is about a woman who I grew up with who got murdered. And we're over in Stratham, and I wrote this book about it because there's a guy named Seth Bader who's currently in prison for a crime that there's a fairly good chance he did not commit. He's serving a life sentence. And I brought both books. I said, look, forget about my poetry book. Let's talk about a real issue for the people of New Hampshire, which is someone in prison for a crime they probably didn't commit. And they literally edited out every mention of that book, even some shots where it was in the background. They tried to they cut them out. We talked about it and they cut it out. And I was like, wow, this is like actually really sketchy. And then I wrote this other book, Community First Economics, and I've tried to get them to cover it. And they're like, no.
They're like, yeah, no controversy.
Yeah, like they don't care. So it's kind of funny. The most disappointing thing about that was that at the same time as we were having this controversy, the Democrats were fighting in Concord about a book ban that the Republicans were trying to put forward.
Right, yeah.
And then rather than like Ray Buckley or the chair defending my book as just, hey, we have right to free speech and saying, hey, I might not agree with what's in the book, but I agree that you can write a book, you know. He came out and said, this is not the Democratic Party and he doesn't stand for blah, 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 and these aren't our values. And I'm like, you know, for a Democrat to be bashing another Democrat in the media when I'm the only one running for governor, I was like, this was kind of one of the red flags where I was like, these...
Definitely one of those fake moral outrage moments, I feel like.
Yeah, he could have just said, I haven't read the book, I can't comment. He could have just said no comment, right? So that showed me that the Democrats were more interested in, again, the moral superiority than actually...
their supposed optics.
Yeah, than actually dealing with what the problem is censorship and book bans. And either you are pro-censorship and book bans or you're not. And either my poetry book is okay, and that also means that Mein Kampf is available in the library. And it also means that a book on LGBTQ people is available in the library. Like, it's either all or nothing, folks. Like, this selective censorship just is not a good idea. And so that was really frustrating. And then the text message fiasco is also fairly, in my mind, stupid. And the fact that it blew up as much as it did caught me off guard, caught a campaign off guard. We did not address it in the way that we should have. I will admit that.
And I think this was also around the time of like the Young Republicans text leak and stuff like that. So I think WMUR themselves were specifically looking for like a controversy to try to, you know, quote unquote balance it out.
Yeah.
So they were like, oh, well, you know, they said a bunch of Hitlerite stuff, this and that. But over here on the Democratic side, there's the guy that said something bad as well. So
well, and the thing that really people need to understand about that issue, and this is the most important thing, okay? Well, there's a few important things, but number one, I was texting Heath to say that I thought a woman had a better chance in CD1 than he did. And this woman ended up not running, but I said specifically, I think she has more connections in DC, she has more connections in the media. I think she has a better chance of winning. And I was running as an independent at the time. I wanted Heath to run as an independent so that if this woman didn't win, that we'd have another chance at beating Stephanie Shaheen in the general election. Okay, so that's what the context of the text was. So to say that I was being misogynistic while supporting a woman for office doesn't make a lot of sense. And also within the text messages, I said, you know, women run the Democratic Party. And this is just a fact.
That is just historically
it's
a fact.
It's Maggie Hassan, Jean Shaheen, it's Alexis Simpson, Rebecca Perkins-Coca, and then you have some gay men such as Chris Pappas, Ray Buckley. But it's just a fact. And I didn't realize how people would get offended by that. And this is another problem with the Democrats. It's like getting offended by facts. I just don't understand that.
For sure.
And part of that's my ADHD. Like, I just live in this kind of logical, reasonable world. And I think everyone sees things the way that I do, and they frequently don't. But the bigger concern is that, the text messages were taken out of context. But this is what's so ironic, right? I was texting him basically saying, hey, we would be better off in another party because there's a very vocal group of the Democrats that is kind of anti-straight white men, and they don't want us there. And I know this because I've dealt with it. And so I'm telling him that. And then those text messages were leaked by a Democrat to WMUR, which sort of proves my point.
Yeah.
Like, why would they try to hurt fellow Democrats? I would understand if Republicans had leaked the text messages, but it was a Democrat. And I know this because I asked the girl from WMUR, I said, where'd you get these? And she said, I said, was it from someone running against me? She said, no, it was from someone in the Democratic Party. I'm pretty sure I know who it was. It's someone that works for the New Hampshire Young Democrats. And why they would want to sabotage, again, the only person at the time running for governor is insane.
Yeah, it seems like a real like Plattner situation or whatever.
No, totally. But the thing was, he had it was with no competition. So they're only sabotaging their own chances of winning. Yeah. And this was ultimately the takeaway was that they were trying to sabotage me when they had no candidate. And I was like, these people don't want to win elections. They just want to make sure that they control the people, even if they can't win.
Right. And they're like, well, our candidate's not out yet, so they already have people like in mind. A lot of Democrats, like in the higher positions, they think that this is kind of like a oh, you're next in line.
Yes,
like this
exactly.
type of deal. Like that's not what people want at all. Like that's not what Democratic voters want. They tried it with Hillary in the national and stuff, and like that obviously didn't work. They tried it with Kamala, that didn't work. Biden slipped through just because of how horrible Trump was, and people were like, Jesus, I guess this guy. But like, it should be really obvious to Democrats, like that's not how the voters like are thinking at this point.
Yeah,
like they would really want people that are gonna like do something.
Yeah, mix it up, and yeah, that really was kind of when I was like starting to realize that hey, it's not just that they are indifferent to me, but they actually like do not want me in this party running. And I was like, at a certain point, it would be stupid for me to continue to run as a Democrat. It would be frankly just completely like I'm the dummy, not them. Like it would be dumb for me to like continue down that road when they clearly like are trying to get me out of the race. And this is like also really important for people to understand. Every governor in New Hampshire's history for the last 100 years has won a second term aside from Craig Benson, who was very unpopular. And the guy that beat Craig Benson was John Lynch, and he spent more than $10 million to do it. So I looked at this and I said, I think we can beat Kelly Ayotte, but only if we start really early, get the campaign going, get everyone behind one candidate, right? So when they didn't have a candidate, the Dems, I said, all right, I'll do it. They'll be forced to get behind me. No one else is going to want to do this. I'll start early so I can get all the all the endorsements and all that stuff. So I started running, and everyone basically said, a lot of the donors were like, well, I heard somebody else is going to run. I heard this other guy's going to run. And then every month ticked by and those people didn't run. And I'm like, guys, we're running out of time here. Like, if you really want to beat her, we should have started 3 months ago. And then when Cindy Warmington announced, I mean, it was literally 7 months later than she had announced the time before, at a much easier election when the seat was empty, Sununu was done. So why wait? And she waited because this issue of Merrimack, the ICE facility, came up, and she thought, bingo, this is really unpopular. Kelly Ayotte's not going to be able to fix it. I'll get in there and campaign just on that. And of course, we know what happened. Kelly Ayotte was miraculously able to stop it, which I was surprised by. Everyone I think was surprised by.
Right.
And all of a sudden, Cindy has really nothing to campaign on because she is frankly a Republican in almost every aspect, aside from, again, the social issues that she'll throw the bone to the progressives on. So I just got to this point where I'm like, you just sabotaged your own chances of winning. You sabotaged my chances of winning. Like, clearly this group of people doesn't actually want to win. It's all about donors and control. And they knew that they could not get me to take the money to control me in a way that would be effective. So it was like, he's more of a threat. What they seem to not realize is that, like, I'm not just going to go away. Like, I'm not going to become a Republican, and I'm not going to be working in an organization that's, frankly, the leadership does not want to win elections, because that's the point. So I'm like, I'm forced to start my own party. And I wanted to do this, but at the same time, I knew it'd be a lot of work. I knew it'd be easier to be a Democrat. I didn't want to risk being a spoiler. I didn't want to do any of that. I was given no choice by the Democrats. I think that's really important for people to understand. This is much harder. Starting a party from scratch is 10 times harder than reforming the Democratic Party. But there is no reforming them. And I urge people that think that there is, run. Go through what I went through, and then tell me, without selling out to the donors, that you can be successful in the Democratic Party. Like, do it. Just run. Run for anything. And because I've heard even on the local level, people getting pushed out because they weren't the candidate that the folks wanted, that the leadership didn't want. And so I would urge people, if you think that I'm not telling the truth about this, or you think there's some secret way to reform the Democrats, I just urge you, run, get involved. If you can do it, because I'd rather a reformed Democratic Party than what we have now. Same with the Republicans. If you can fix them, do it. But I've tried. I tried a lot. I tried for, years at this point. And I'm just telling you, I don't think it's possible with this current group of people running the party. I just don't think it's possible.
Right. And even if, nobody from the party themselves gets elected, it's just the matter of getting on the stage as well, to debate these people, to move the conversations toward the issues that you want to see done. Bernie did a really good job at this back in, 2016 before, getting, kicked out by the Democrats.
Yeah. Well, no, this is exactly what I was thinking, because actually this is sort of funny. When the drama started kicking up with WMUR about the text messages and the book, I thought, man, they're probably going to keep attacking me if I'm the candidate, and it's going to be coming. I'm running literally against the Republicans plus the Democratic establishment. How can I beat them both? And I am a Democrat, so I was like, man, this is probably going to keep happening. And it was kind of funny because I started thinking I actually sort of want Cindy Wormington to run, because I don't want to screw with these people anymore. They seem to be completely insane and just useless. And so I would rather be outside of that. And then I really wanted to be Cindy because it wouldn't really work with anybody else. But I'm like, just imagine me on the WMUR debate stage, literally a lobbyist to the left of me, lobbyist to the right of me. Here I am, small business owner, stuck in the middle with you,
Yeah, exactly.
And so I think people will look at it and just the absurdity of the Democrats putting up a lobbyist for Purdue Pharma, former lobbyist for Purdue Pharma, in a state ravaged by the opioid epidemic. And then the Republicans putting up a candidate that was a lobbyist for Blackstone, this big, mega corp that's buying up rental property and single family homes and raising up prices of housing. I think they'll just see it and go, okay, who's trying to help my community?
Right.
And just also imagine this. This is going to be so fun. So when the ballot gets printed, it's going to say Democrat, Republican, other. And my name will be on the right. It'll say Jon Kiper, Community First for governor. So someone's going to look at that and go, Community First, huh? What does Republican stand for? I don't know. What does the Democrat stand for? I don't know. Yeah. What is this guy? He's saying he's going to put my community first. I'm going to check that guy off. Right. And then once we get the 4%, which I'm pretty sure we can do, then the next year it'll literally say Democrat, Republican, Community First on the top of the ballot. And I think someone just walking in there who's disgruntled is going to go, I'm going to go Community First. I don't know anything about these guys, but I'm going to go Community First. Right. So I think we have a real opportunity to make big change in New Hampshire. I think New Hampshire specifically because we have a purple, cohort of people. I think people are hungry for a new message, and that's Community First economics and the Community First Party. And I think that in 10 years, when we've really got this thing off the ground, people are going to look back at this and they're going to go, I'm really glad they did that. I'm really glad they did that. And it's going to be hard, but the beginning is always the hardest part of the work. It's, there's this fear we could be called a spoiler. There's a fear that we could, whatever. But I think ultimately, I mean,
if the two parties that we're supposed to vote for in this two-party system are spoiling themselves, no one wants to vote for either of those, and it's kind of incumbent on you to, try something different, is it not? Right?
Yeah,
at some point.
Yeah. Well, and ultimately too, I mean, I've only spent $25,000 on marketing in both campaigns, right? And the fact that I was thinking about this last night.
Oh my God, that's another huge thing. All these old school Democrats being we need ads on TV, on broadcast television. It's that's not what people are watching anymore, dude. You're wasting millions of dollars on stuff no one's watching, or they're just changing the channel when it comes up. Yeah.
Well, and it's funny to me because having spent so little money and, basically just making social media that anyone has an opinion about me at all.
But you have heard of me.
I know, right? Yeah. So it kind of cracks me up because on the one side, I'm like, wow, people that don't know me have gotten hardened opinions about me, positive and negatively, and it's kind of mind blowing because I'm it's just all these people I've never met, and it's a very odd experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it definitely relates to that. Any closing comments you want to make?
Yes, check out our website cfparty.org. Mm-hmm. You can also read my entire book, Community First Economics. You can read it for free on the website, communityfirsteconomics.com. I don't know if we didn't really talk about the book, but The book outlines basically a lot of the economic theory that is behind the party, and outlines how we can get. Actually, we did talk about it.
Yeah, we did talk about
I
that.
forgot.
You know what? I'm going to read that, and then I'm going to come back and then interview you about that more in depth.
All right, yeah,
We'll
good.
do that.
Yeah, that sounds great, because I think actually you're going to be. You mentioned a lot of the sort of themes of it already, so I think you'll be right there.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like what you're talking about is a lot of like what I like to talk about anyway as topics. Like, for just helping people be more aware of the things that are happening and things that should be happening. With government.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Awesome talking with you.
See you in New Hampshire. Yeah.